This is Penn Woods interviewing for the Oklahoma Living Legends, and I'm interviewing Ms. Mary. Is it Mrs. or Miss? Mrs. Mary Cooprider, Cooperrider. Uh, Ms. Cooprider is has lived in Medford and was from Waukeeta earlier than that. Came to Waukeeta at the age of about 8 or 9 years old, I believe.
I come northwest of Medford when I was about 9, out in the country.
Now, I might ask Ms. Cooperider if you'll tell me who your father and mother were, your father's name and your mother's maiden name, and a little of their background.
Well, my father's name was E.G. Edward George Pasby, P-A-S-B-Y, and he was born near London, England. Come to this country at 9 years old.
What brought the family here?
Well, I don't know. His daddy had come over ahead of him, and then, of course, the family come later. But I don't know why, unless they just wanted a different life.
And your...
My mother was born near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and she had been married before she married my daddy. And her name was Townsend before she was ever married. T-O-W-N-S-O-N.
Townsend. Now, you were born where?
Lincoln, Nebraska.
Lincoln, Nebraska, and you came to, in what year did you come to Waukeeta? Do you remember?
No, well, I know what year I come to Waukeeta, but I don't remember.
Oklahoma when?
Yeah, well, I can't remember, but they was a harvesting their first good wheat crop. And they told my daddy that if he went out in the harvest field, they'd get so hot they'd burn the fellies out of his wagon wheels. But he went on and went through the harvest.
And that was about what year do you recall?
Well, it had been about 5 years, I think, after the strip opened.
I see. So that would have been about 1898.
I expect.
What was the first thing you remember about about this area, North Oklahoma area?
Well, we come in a covered wagon, and about the first thing I can remember, we stopped with Grandma and Grandpa, and was staying there, and they was in a sod house, 2-room sod house, and I was just a kid, and sister, Mama had made her a little hammock out of a piece of canvas and hung it on the knob on the organ and tied it to the foot of the bed, and that made a hammock, and we was in the house by ourselves, and all at once the corner of the roof commenced to flop up and down, and I grabbed her and went outdoors, and there was a light tornado went through, but that's all it done. It just flopped the roof up and down. The roof was boards with sod on top of it.
How long did you live in the sod house?
Oh, I expect a couple of months with them till we could find a place to go to ourselves.
Why don't you describe a sod house, what it's like?
Oh, it's wonderful. The one we lived in was nice. Didn't have any board floor, but it had the dirt floor, and there was a gyp place in the dirt on the place where it was at, and they went up there and got gyp and mixed it with water and plastered it inside, and when it got dry, it was pale blue inside, and they had short windows in it and heavy doors. And it was cool in the summertime and really warm in the winter. And then I lived in 2 dugouts.
Well, tell about the dugout.
Well, the first one was boarded up clear around. It was all one big room, and it had big windows on top from a shelf about so wide all around it. From that shelf up then was big windows, different places, and it was all shingled on the outside, that part that was up on the ground. And there we lost my sister.
How did you lose her?
She died.
What from?
Well, she choked on a piece of coconut, and she never did get over it. The doctor said when that caused a ulcer on her lungs, and he said when that broke, if she had strength enough, she would cough it up, but she wasn't. She couldn't do it. She was about 2 years old.
Can you During this period, where was the sod house and the dugout? Where was
Well,
that?
it was about 9 miles west of Renfro. Not quite 9 miles, but about that.
Was it in a community of any other houses, or was that by?
Oh, just them that was homesteading up their farms is all.
They were about as far apart as farms.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Describe life as it was on that type of farm.
Well, it's not much different. Just we had to plow and plow like we do now. Only we didn't have tractors. We had horses and mules. We had a cow and we had 2 mules and 2 horses. But other than that, well, it was just farm life is all I could tell you.
Did you learn to plow?
Never had to. Papa would never let me.
Did you want to?
Well, I'd like to, but I never did. And after I got married, my husband wouldn't let me either. So I guess I was one of the lucky ones or not. I don't know.
They still haven't yet. What all did you do on the farm?
Well, I just helped take care of the younger kids, and then after I got big enough, I learned to milk, and we milked cows. The folks brought a cow with them here, hauled her from Lincoln, Nebraska to Sheridan, Iowa in a wagon, and then from there down here, why, she walked. And they put her on a lariat rope after we got down here, and she went to a buffalo waller for water, and she got tangled up in the rope and fell and broke her neck. She was just a young cow. Papa thought us kids all had to have milk.
Now, where did you go to school?
Well, I went, the first school I went to in Oklahoma was just over the state line this way, and south line of Kansas there, and just north of a little place they call Lyle. And Ambrose Dickafuss was my teacher.
How far was that from your farm?
Oh, about a mile.
You walked up there.
Why, sure. How else would we go?
That's right.
And we all had a good time when we was at school. We played and had different games and never seemed to have any trouble like they do now.
What was the size of your school?
Well, I expect there was about 40 of us.
How many classrooms?
Just the one.
Now you had several grades. All the grades.
All was in one room.
Why don't you
From the 1st to the 8th, kindergarten to the 8th.
Why don't you describe how school is conducted, where you have so many classrooms and people at so many levels?
Well, I never went to one with so many classrooms.
How many were in yours?
Well, about 40 of us in schoolhouse, I guess, altogether.
But you had no, but I'm talking
Oh,
about
in the
class
class.
levels. How many?
Oh, 8.
Then describe how they conducted school with so many class levels.
I don't know how they done it, but they did, and we had about 10 subjects, and we always got through them every day. Never had to carry one over.
What were principal subjects that you taught?
Well, history and reading and writing and arithmetic and spelling. We'd have on Friday after last recess, we'd have our line up along the wall and have our spelling contest, and we'd get head marks. If we got cleared up from the foot to the top, we'd get a head mark. And when we got so many head marks, then we'd have to go back down and start over. And the same way, we'd go different places at night on weekends and have ciphering contests and spelling contests. And when I went to school at Old L, we even went to Renfro and played baseball.
Where's Old L?
It's, well, let's see, there was 30 here, and then it was 3 miles west of 30.
You called it Old L?
Well, the house was that shape,
Like
the schoolhouse, or kind of like a T, but everybody called it Old L.
Was it a 2-room schoolhouse?
Yes, but we had our classes in one room, and our seats were all in the other. Our seats was in the part that faced the west, and our classes was in the part that faced the east.
What was the most exciting thing that happened during the period you were in school?
Oh, I don't know. Nothing too exciting, I guess.
Did you mentioned baseball. Did you have both boys and girls baseball?
Oh, yes. We played both.
Did you play on the girls'
Yes.
team? What position?
Well, usually a catcher or a pitcher.
Who did you play?
Well, we played Renfro one time when we was up there, and then we just played among ourselves mostly, and just neighbors.
How'd you come out against Renfro?
We won it. We had to.
Yeah.
My daddy let him have the team and wagon to go in.
So the team traveled by wagon to Renfro to play.
Sure, drove it. Any other way to go.
Now, where did you finish high school?
I never finished high school.
How far did you go?
Just to the 8th grade.
To the 8th grade.
I finished the 8th grade, but I never went to high school.
And that was
at Waukeeta.
At Waukeeta. What did you do after that?
Well, my folks was always in business of some kind, and I had to stay and help them.
What kind of?
Well, Papa run a cafe, and then they run 2 of the hotels that used to be at Waukeeta, and of course I worked with them.
And why don't you talk about a hotel in that period and what's involved in running a hotel then?
Well, it's just like it is now. You had to have beds, and the folks had some beds, and they let their rooms out, some of them for 50 cents and some for a quarter. One time when they had the cafe, there was a man come through. We didn't know him, but he told my husband he was just a friend to us then. He stayed there with the folks, and he told him he knew him. He said, "You fed me a lot of times at Joplin," but Murat didn't remember him. And he didn't have the money to pay, so Papa let him go on. And about 10 days later, we got a letter with a quarter in it for the meal. He'd sent it back. Papa never expected to get it, but he said nobody was going hungry around him.
What about TV and swimming pools? You say it's just like today.
No.
There's a few differences there.
Yeah.
What were? I mean, today a hotel has, particularly the large hotels, have many services. They have gift shops, they have swimming pools, club rooms, and all that sort of thing. Talk about the hotel. Just what all did it have?
Well, it just had the office, and then nearly all of them served meals, and they had a dining room and the office, and then the sleeping rooms was usually upstairs, just very common.
No private club?
No, never heard of such a thing then. And when I was about 15, I had the typhoid fever, and we lived in a dugout 4 miles north of here and about a half a mile west. And one of our neighbors lived here in town that had lived by us out on the farm. He brought the doctor out 2 or 3 times a week to see how I was making it. Never charged us anything. The doctor had Mama put water in a crock outdoors, and when it got some ice in it, that was in the wintertime, and I had it. And when it got some ice in, he told her to wring that cloth out and put it on my breast and stomach, and just fan it till it got dry. That brought my temperature down.
How many years did you live in a dugout?
Oh, I expect 2 altogether.
Now, tell about your marriage. You got married when?
1910.
1910.
Yeah, and I was 21.
And at that time, you were working in the hotel.
Yes.
Your husband, what did he do?
He was just a common laborer till he went to farming, and then we farmed, and we farmed from 1916 till 48. We moved into town here in 48.
Is he living now?
No, he's been gone 3 years.
His name was what?
Mary Cooprider.
Mary Cooprider. What is Cooperider?
Well, it's French and German. His people on his mother's side come from France, and on his daddy's side they were Germans.
The
Indian got his grandpa on his mother's side. And left his great grandpa a baby in the cradle.
What?
Yeah, they took the grandpa and left the baby in the cradle, and some of the neighbors raised him.
That's interesting. Where was that?
Well, I guess in Maryland, that's where they landed. They say Grandma said.
What did they do? Just find the Indian the Indian baby where their baby should have been?
No, no, they didn't leave an Indian baby. They just took the baby and went off with it and left the grandpa, the baby's father.
Oh, yeah. The what tribe was that? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Why don't you talk? Now you farmed after that. After you were married, well, you and your husband farmed. Why don't you talk about some of the experiences of farming during this period?
Well, as I said, we had to use horses to pull the machinery with, and when he got his first combine, he pulled it with 12 head of horses. And there was no tank on it to catch the grain. He had to pull a wagon by the side to catch the grain in it. And the people that owned the place lived here in Medford, and she'd call over every day to see how many bushels we'd cut. We lived north of Waukeeta. And I told her there wasn't any way for me to tell her that. She said, well, it's a funny machine. Well, they didn't have scales on them, the first ones that come out. So that was it, I guess.
Were you sharecropping then?
Yeah. We paid so much rent for the pasture and a third of the grain. And then the alfalfa, we paid cash rent on it. But I don't remember how much.
How much grain were you able to harvest at that time in a day?
Oh, I expect he'd harvest 200 or 300 bushel.
Were you raising anything besides wheat?
No. No, that's all they thought could grow in Oklahoma was wheat.
Were you gardening too?
Oh, just our home gardens all. He planted, him and one of the other neighbors planted 200 pounds of potatoes around a straw stack one time, and we got 3 wagon box loads from it. We got one, and the man that owned the place got one, and then a neighbor, he wanted to pick the patch over, and they told him if he'd hair it down and pick it over, he could have them, and he got a wagon box load too.
What were some of the problems of farming during this period? Did you have the dust storm problem?
Well, not so much. It didn't seem like. Of course, we didn't get everything plowed up so quick. Of course, there'd be some weeds grow, but then we got by anyway. And we sold cream one time. The man that come around to taking census, I wanted to know how much cream we sold, and I had kept track of it. And we had sold $300 worth, and he said we sold more than anybody in the county. But we had to hand milk and turn the separator by hand, and that was it.
What were some of the problems of farming during this period?
Well, just problems like usual, I guess. We had to always be sure we had seed wheat, and it was sometimes hard to get help to help us. Because before we got the combine, we used a binder and bound it and had to shock it. One time there was an old man helping us, and he wanted to eat 4 times a day. And whenever them times come, he'd come to the house and ask for something to eat. Mother, if Grandma didn't fix it, I would fix him a sandwich or something. He'd go back and work just as hard as ever then. And then one time he told my husband, we live close to the railroad track, and he says, you know what I'd do if I was you? And he said, no. He said, well, I'd just tie my things up in a red band and a handkerchief and put them on a stick and go walking down to them red streaks, the railroad. But we didn't. We just still stayed with it. My husband liked the farm and didn't want anything else, so that was all we could do.
What about your own children?
I just never had any.
Never had any.
We have a son that we raised, but we never did adopt him even. My folks did, and then they wouldn't sign the papers for us to adopt him, so he come to stay with us, and we just kept him, and he lives in Anthony, and he's married and has a son and a daughter. And they're both connected with the police department. The daughter is police dispatcher, and the son is license tag inspector.
That's your two grandchildren.
Yes.
I mean by adoption,
Yeah.
sort of, not
Yeah,
by
no, just by. But they call me Grandma and
yeah.
call him Grandpa. And
The
and the boy is Mom and Dad.
what does the boy do now?
Well, he's been janitor at that Chaparral High School ever since it opened. He has 2 more years and then he can retire.
Well,
And they did have a rest home, and sold it out. So it was more than either one of them could take, so they just disposed of it.
What would you say was the most exciting experience of your life?
Well, I don't know. One time, my half-brother and I was going over south of Waukeeta to some folks we knew over there, and we come by a farm where there was a wooden windmill, homemade, and it went ee-aw, ee-aw, as the wind had taken it around, and it scared our horse. She run off with us and throwed brother between the shafts and the wheel of the buggy, and then I jumped out and he got out of it, and she run down to the doctor's house and run into his house and broke one board in the house. Run the wheel into the house. So I guess that was about the most exciting. I was afraid brother was going to get killed.
What about people that you have known during the period of time who may have played a major role in the community or the area where you were living?
I don't know.
You don't think of any?
No.
What was the most difficult thing about living and growing up on or being on a farm during all of these years? The most difficult, trying thing?
Well, if you get snowed in, why, you'd just be there. You couldn't go no place if you wanted to. 1918, we was supposed to go to Missouri, and the next morning when we got up, the day we was supposed to go, we couldn't even get to town with the car. Had to go with a teaming wagon. So that was kind of hard. I never had been to see his people, and he was going out to see his people. They lived in Missouri, and that's what we run into, and we was about 24 hours on the road when we should have been less than a day. We went on the train. We left on the last one that come through Waukeeta when the snow was on, and back on the first freight they had that time.
What would you say is the most rewarding or pleasant thing about the farming?
Well, you're just kind of independent, to my way of thinking. If you don't want to do something that you don't have to, why, it ain't like having somebody stand over you and say, well, you do this and this and that now. You can just kind of do as you want to.
Where did you sell most of your grain?
Well, he took some of it to Jefferson, and he sold it to Waukeeta mostly. But when he'd take it to Jefferson, he'd trade it and get our flour. And it was always good flour, too.
What was the highest and the lowest that you recall that this wheat sold for?
Well, we sold some for 25 cents a bushel, and we sold some for $2.
That would be about the highest and the lowest.
Yeah.
When was it 25 cents?
Well, it was in 30, I think. We lived down here south of Medford at that time.
Were you able to make any money at all that year?
No, not a bit. That's where we sold so much cream. If it hadn't been for the old cows, we wouldn't have stayed on the farm. And that wasn't pleasant, milking all them old cows, 10 and 15 at a time.
What kind of cows were they?
Well, they was mostly Herefords, white faces. We had one or two he paid $200 for.
Did you churn any butter?
Yes, but I never sold any.
Never sold it.
Because I didn't have any way to keep it cold and solid, so it would be too soft by the time you get to town. I didn't even try to bring it. I sold eggs for 5 cents a dozen.
There wasn't much market for buttermilk then either, was there?
Uh-uh.
People fed it to the hogs.
No, yeah. We give milk away. Sold it for 5 cents a quart, and I bought butter when I didn't have cow for 20 cents a pound. When we was married, I paid 25 cents a pound for the best of beefsteak, and the butcher would give us the liver to everybody. They didn't just give it to us; they give it to everybody. And now here, look at it. It's 90-some cents a pound now.
The liver is considered the most nutritious part anyway.
I guess, but then I don't know why they want so much for it, but they do.
Because it'll sell for that, probably.
Maybe. And a quarter's worth of sugar would last 5 of us a week when we was married.
Let's talk about that. Let's go back to the dugout a little bit and talk a little bit about the lifestyles. And you had very when you were in a dugout and when you were in the sod houses, you had very little that was shipped in. You probably didn't have fuel. What about fuel? How'd you handle fuel?
Well, burn cow chips.
Gather
them and bring them in by the tubs full and the wagon box full. And then the only trouble was they made lots of ashes, but we baked our own bread and everything and burned cow chips.
Was there, once it has dried, is there much smell to cow chips?
Oh, there's no smell whatever.
Or it's just like, it would be just like ordinary organic matter, but you don't have the smell.
No smell whatever.
I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding. The idea revolts them, and they think that there would be.
But there isn't.
Let's talk about some of the other habits of that time. I mean, you had to use cow chips for fuel when you didn't have wood. What else did you have to make do?
Well, I don't know about that.
Were there any substitutes for sugar?
Well, not that I knew of, because we had always had enough that we got by. None of us used too much of it. And as I said, a quarter's worth would last us a week.
What were the beverages?
Coffee. Tea. Milk at our place.
How about sassafras?
Not too much, only in the spring.
Tell about sassafras, though.
Oh, I don't know, 'cause I never had to drink too much of
you
it.
didn't? You didn't like it? I used to drink it.
Mother never would make us. I never was sick. I never was in the hospital till 4 years ago. I had this eye worked on. It was the first time I'd ever been in the hospital. And I'll be 86 years old in November.
First tea I ever drank was sassafras tea.
Ew.
Can
to eat sulfur and molasses.
tell about it.
Well, it just was sulfur and molasses, that's all.
How did it taste?
Oh, it didn't taste good. Tasted like the sulfur to me.
Well, the molasses was there to try to sweeten the sulfur.
Yeah, but it didn't break the taste to me.
You think it got you well?
Well, I don't know. I never was sick, so I guess maybe it kept me well.
You just took it as a tonic.
Yeah.
To keep you going.
Mm-hmm.
What other remedies did you have?
Well, just home remedies. What we'd get a cold, Mother'd put turpentine and lard on us, mix turpentine and lard together and put that on us and put the flannel cloth over it, keep us in the house.
What is the feeling of turpentine and lard?
Just like any cold cream would be.
Was the turpentine feel cold or hot?
It was just warm when she'd put it on there, and that's all. Just like you'd put on any mentholatum or Vicks or anything like that.
And they'd rub it all over you.
Yeah, all over my breast.
And this is when you were feeling sick.
Yeah, when you felt like you was taking a cold or had one.
You think it helped?
Well, I don't know. I never was sick. Never had the sore throat or anything. So I guess it helped.
Something helped, didn't it?
Yeah.
Something caused it.
No, I never was sick. Only when I had the fever, and typhoid fever, and I was about 15 then.
Any other remedies? Was there an epidemic of typhoid?
No, I don't know. I think I took it from my dad. He got it. He was running a starch machine, and he got sick, and they brought him to the doctor, and they said it was typhoid fever. And then his mother lived in Waukeeta, and she come out and got him and took him down there, and then I stayed with her and helped take care of him, and then I got it. So I always thought maybe I got it from Dad, but I didn't know.
How long did you have it?
Well, I can't remember just when I took it, but I remembered when I was there with Grandma, I helped her can tomatoes, and I wanted some tomatoes, and they said, no, I couldn't have it. I had typhoid fever, and I couldn't have anything with seeds in it, because my stomach was sore inside, and I couldn't have that. So that ruined my tomatoes, but one day Grandma come out to see me after they said I was over it, and she brought me a half a gallon of tomatoes that we had canned. She'd stuck them back and saved them for me, and I liked cranberries, and Mother saved me some cranberries, and I could have them then, and when I started to eat, well, I wanted pancakes, and they said no pancakes, and I did, but I eat a half of one at a time till I got to where I could eat a whole one.
Why couldn't you eat pancakes?
Well, I don't know why. They said my stomach wouldn't let me from the fever, so that's all I knew. I wanted, well, they called it Agosy then, but it's just like cornflakes today. I wanted some of that, and the doctor said I could have it, but to put it in a cup and set it on the stove and put some milk in it and let it soak. And when the milk got warm, I could have the milk off of it, but I couldn't have the cornflakes. And I thought, well, he wouldn't let me have that. He'd sure let me have grape nuts. So I asked for them, and he said fix them the same way. And that's the way I got them, just with the milk.
They made grape nuts back that far?
Yes. You could get grape nuts in.
Same as now?
Yeah, just like they are now.
Well, if cornflakes would mess you up, grape nuts really would.
Well, I guess they would, but I didn't think they would.
You were hungry and wanted it.
Yes.
What's the feeling of typhoid fever? You know, very few people have it anymore.
I know it. They vaccinate for it and things like that now. Well, you just have a high fever, and Dad got weak with it. And, of course, he couldn't eat either. And the doctor at Waukeeta wanted Grandma to give him whiskey. And she told him she couldn't, and he wanted to know why. And she said, well, it always makes him sick, makes him throw up. No, he said, rub it on when his fever leaves him. He says, you just rub it in. And that's the way she done him. But it didn't make him sick that way. But if he'd have drank it, he'd have just throwed up over everything.
Did he get the same sensation from rubbing the whiskey in?
I guess so. I don't know.
It'd be like rubbing alcohol.
Uh-huh, yes. But that's what he told us to do, and we did.
This being a most interesting interview, can you think of anything else we ought to talk about? I should leave the room again. You come up with good ideas.
I know.
You think of anything else we should talk about?
No, not that I know of.
Well, this has been a very, very interesting interview with Mrs. Cooperider in Medford on April the 8th of 1976.